Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundation of Sand. Maxwell Max Donovan had always believed family came first. At 48, he'd built his life around that principle. A successful construction business that transformed neglected properties into architectural marvels, a sprawling home in Oak Ridge's most prestigious neighborhood, and what he thought was a happy 20-year marriage to Victoria. Max hadn't come from money. The calluses on his hands told the story of a man who'd climbed from nothing, working construction sites from 16 until he saved enough to start his own company. His father had abandoned the family when Max was 12, leaving his mother to raise 3 children alone. The memory of her exhaustion after double shifts as a hospital janitor had fueled his drive. "You'll never be your father," his mother had told him on her deathbed 10 years ago. "You built something real." Victoria Barrett had been the daughter of wealth, the princess of Oak Ridge Country Club where Max had been hired to oversee renovations. Their meeting had raised eyebrows, the rough-edged contractor and the socialite. Her family, especially her mother Pamela, had never fully accepted him despite his eventual success. "New money is still new," Pamela would say within earshot at family gatherings, gin and tonic in hand. Their son Alexander, Alex, had been Max's pride. From the boy's earliest days, Max had been hands-on, attending every baseball game and science fair when Victoria claimed social obligations. He'd taught Alex to fish at the lake house, to change a tire, to stand up for himself. "Dad, you know why I work so hard?" 17-year-old Alex had asked one night in his home workshop where they were restoring a vintage motorcycle. "Because I've seen what you built from nothing." The cracks in the marriage had appeared gradually. Victoria's increasing coldness. The separate bedroom she'd insisted on 2 years ago, citing Max's early morning job site visits. The unexplained weekend retreats with friends Max never met. He buried himself in work, in raising Alex, telling himself things would improve after Alex graduated and left for college. 3 days before graduation, Max had been in his study reviewing contracts when his phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Need to talk, Dad." "Don't tell Mom." They'd met at their favorite diner, where Alex had pushed his fries around the plate nervously. "Dad, I think something's wrong with Mom," he'd finally said. "She's been acting weird. Secretive. I heard her on the phone saying she can't wait much longer and needs to finalize things." Max had reassured his son, suggesting business matters or perhaps a surprise for graduation. But the conversation had planted a seed of unease that grew as graduation approached. The night before the ceremony, Victoria had announced that her family would be attending in full force. "My mother wants to sit front and center," she'd said, not meeting his eyes. "She's bringing Uncle Howard and Aunt Liz too." "No problem," Max had replied, distracted by pricing a new development project. "As long as we're all there for Alex." He hadn't noticed Victoria's slight smile as she turned away, phone clutched in her hand. That evening, Max had received a strange email from his accountant, a routine notification about a significant withdrawal from their joint account. Thinking it a system error, he made a note to call the bank on Monday. The morning of graduation, Victoria had left early to help set up. Max had arrived alone to find the Barrett family occupying the entire front row, designer outfits, and expensive perfume marking their territory. "Sorry, no room for you," Pamela had said with a thin smile. Victoria saved these seats for family. The words had hit like a physical blow. For family. As if he weren't family at all. Chapter 2. The Revelation. The high school auditorium hummed with anticipation as families filed in for the graduation ceremony. Banners proclaiming "Congratulations, Class of '25" hung from the rafters, and the stage was decorated with the school's blue and gold colors. Max nodded stiffly at his mother-in-law's dismissal and retreated to find a seat near the back. From there, he could see Victoria in the front row, her sleek blonde bob freshly styled, whispering something to her sister Liz. They both glanced back at him and laughed. Principal Hoffman began the ceremony with a speech about bright futures. Max barely heard him, instead watching his wife. 20 years of marriage, and suddenly she felt like a stranger. She kept checking her phone, smiling at texts. When Alex's name was announcnced as valedictorian, Max's chest swelled with pride. The boy looked so grown up in his cap and gown, confident as he approached the podium. Unlike Victoria's natural blonde, Alex had inherited Max's darker features, strong jaw, intense brown eyes that missed nothing. "Thank you, Principal Hoffman," Alex began. "Today marks not just an end, but a beginning. We stand at the threshold of our futures, shaped by those who believed in us." Max watched his son command the audience with natural charisma. The boy had his determination, but possessed a polish Max had never acquired. "I want to thank the one person who never gave up on me," Alex continued, his voice firm. "Dad, could you stand?" Surprised, Max rose as applause filled the auditorium. Victoria's smile faltered as she turned, seemingly noticing him for the first time. "My father taught me that character isn't built on words, but actions," Alex said. "He showed me that real strength comes from integrity and perseverance." Max felt a lump in his throat as he nodded at his son, pride mingling with confusion at the intensity in Alex's eyes. "And now," Alex continued, his tone shifting, "I'd like to share something I found on Mom's phone last night." The audience went silent. Victoria's face drained of color as she clutched her purse. She half rose, then froze as Alex pulled out a folded document from his pocket. "I wasn't snooping," Alex explained, his voice tight. "Mom asked me to find her reading glasses. When I picked up her phone to call it, a notification appeared." He unfolded the paper. It was divorce papers, already signed and dated yesterday. Gasps rippled through the audience. Victoria sank back in her seat, her sister gripping her arm. "But that wasn't all," Alex continued, his voice growing harder. "There were messages to someone saved as TR about plans for after graduation, about how they'd finally be free." Max stood frozen, the pieces clicking together with sickening clarity. And then Alex said, "I found this." He tapped his phone, and suddenly the auditorium speakers blared with Victoria's recorded voice. "Once the divorce is filed, Max won't know what hit him. Tom's lawyer says we can get at least half the business since Max can't prove I wasn't instrumental in its success. The prenup is useless." "Alex!" Victoria screamed, lunging toward the stage. "Stop this right now." But Alex wasn't finished. He pressed another button, and a photo appeared on the graduation slideshow screen behind him. Victoria wrapped in the arms of a man Max recognized immediately. Thomas Reed, his former business partner who'd left the company 3 years ago. "The truth deserves to be heard," Alex said, his voice breaking. "Dad deserves to know before he's blindsided." Principal Hoffman hurried to the stage, attempting to regain control of the ceremony as murmurs erupted throughout the auditorium. Victoria's family closed ranks around her, Pamela shooting daggers at Max, as if he were somehow responsible for the scene. Max stood immobile, watching as his life imploded in public. 20 years. 20 years of marriage, ending not in a private conversation, but in a public execution. His eyes locked with Victoria's across the distance. For a moment, he saw not defiance, but fear in her expression. "Good." Chapter 3. Scorched Earth. The hours following the graduation ceremony passed in a blur for Max. He remembered Principal Hoffman cutting the ceremony short, remembered the pitying glances from other parents, remembered Victoria being hustled away by her family without so much as a backward glance. Alex had found him in the parking lot, still in his graduation gown. "I'm sorry, Dad," he'd said, voice raw. "I couldn't let her blindside you. They were planning to serve you papers tonight at what was supposed to be my graduation dinner." Max had embraced his son tightly. "You have nothing to apologize for." Now, 3 hours later, Max sat in his home office, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him as he methodically reviewed financial records. The house was silent. Victoria hadn't returned, and Alex had gone to stay with his best friend Carson's family for the night, giving Max space. The betrayal cut deep, but something colder was taking hold in Max's chest. Something calculating. His phone rang. Gregory Winters, his attorney and poker buddy of 15 years. "Max, I heard what happened," Greg said without preamble. Victoria's lawyer already called me. Thomas Reed's involved. Tom, Max said flatly. My former partner, and apparently my wife's current one. They're moving fast, Greg continued. Filing first thing Monday morning. They're going after the company, Max claiming she was an instrumental silent partner all these years. Max laughed, a sound devoid of humor. She's never set foot in my office except for the Christmas party. There's more. They've been planning this for months. Victoria's transferred nearly $300,000 from your joint accounts gradually over the past year. And Reed's firm just won the Westridge development bid, the one you were counting on. Max's eyes narrowed. The Westridge project, a $40 million downtown revitalization his company had been pursuing for months. The pieces were falling into place. Tom had inside information from Victoria, had used it to undercut Max's bid. What do they expect me to do? Roll over? Apparently, Greg said, the amount they're demanding in the settlement is substantial. They seem to think you'll want to avoid a messy public court battle. After today's graduation ceremony, that ship has sailed, Max replied. Greg, I need you to secure everything. Business accounts, personal accounts, property deeds. Lock it all down tonight. Already on it, Greg assured him. But Max, Victoria's family has connections throughout this town. Judge Barrett, her uncle, I know. Max's voice was steel. They think they've won already. What are you going to do? Max looked at the photographs on his desk, his parents in front of their modest home, himself breaking ground on his first development, Alex's fishing trophy. Conspicuously absent, any photo of Victoria. I'm going to burn their world to the ground, Max said quietly. But first, I need information. All of it. How long? What they've taken? Who else is involved? Max, I built everything I have from nothing, Greg. I can do it again if I have to. But they don't get to take what's mine without consequences. After hanging up, Max opened his laptop and began making a list. Names, dates, possible allies, definite enemies. The Barrett family had always considered him an outsider, unworthy of their precious daughter despite his success. They'd tolerated him as Victoria's unfortunate choice. Now, they would learn what happened when you cornered a man with nothing left to lose. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I have information you need. About Victoria, Tom, and the others. Meet tomorrow, 1 p.m., Riverside Park. Come alone. Natalie Reeves. Max stared at the name. Natalie Reeves, Tom Reed's executive assistant. The woman who had access to all of Tom's files, calendar, communications. For the first time since the ceremony, Max smiled. Chapter 4. Gathering Intelligence. Riverside Park bustled with Sunday afternoon visitors. Families picnicking, joggers navigating the paths, elderly couples feeding ducks by the water. Max spotted Natalie Reeves on a bench near the boathouse, her red hair unmistakable even from a distance. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said as he sat beside her. No handshake, no greeting. Information is valuable, Max replied, studying her. 30-something, sharp eyes, professional demeanor even in casual clothes. Why are you reaching out? Natalie glanced around before answering. Let's just say loyalty should be rewarded, not betrayed. She handed him a flash drive. Emails, text backups, calendar entries, financial transactions. 2 years' worth. Tom's not as careful as he thinks. And I've had access to everything. Why help me? Max asked bluntly. Natalie's expression hardened. I joined redevelopment when Tom started it after leaving your company. He promised me equity, a partnership track. Last month, I discovered he's been paying me 30% less than my male counterparts. When I confronted him, he laughed and said I should be grateful for the opportunity. Max nodded slowly. And Victoria? She's been coming to the office for at least 3 years. After hours, weekends. Natalie's lips thinned. Tom's divorcing his wife Diane too. She doesn't know yet. Another casualty in their schemes. Max filed that information away. There's a meeting Tuesday evening, Natalie continued. Victoria, Tom, Judge Barrett, and Lawrence Foster from First National Bank. They're discussing financing for Westridge after your company is neutralized. Their word, not mine. Max's hands clenched. Lawrence Foster, he'd golfed with the man, had his family over for barbecues. Another betrayal. The drive contains everything, including their contingency plans if you fight back, which they expect you will. They've thought of everything, Max murmured. Not everything, Natalie corrected. They don't know about me. After Natalie left, Max remained on the bench, turning the flash drive over in his hands. The perfect spring day continued around him. Children laughing, couples holding hands, oblivious to the storm brewing inside him. His phone rang. Alex, Dad, you okay? I can come home. I'm fine, son. Stay with Carson tonight, as planned. Have you heard from Mom? No, Max said truthfully. But I expect we'll be having a conversation soon. Dad, there's something else you should know, Alex said hesitantly. Last night, before I found those messages, I overheard Mom on the phone with Grandma Barrett. She said something about making sure you never see a dime of the trust. What trust? Max asked sharply. I don't know, but they mentioned Grandfather Barrett's estate. Max thanked his son and hung up, mind racing. Victoria's father, Harold Barrett, had died 3 years ago. The man had never warmed to Max, but they'd maintained a cordial relationship. What trust was Victoria referring to? On his way home, Max drove past Reed Development's office building. A light was on in the top-floor corner office. Tom's office. Max slowed, noting the silver Audi in the otherwise empty parking lot, Victoria's car. Sunday afternoon work session. His stomach churned with disgust. At home, Max inserted Natalie's flash drive into his computer and began reading. The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking. Victoria and Tom's affair had begun 4 years ago, not long after Tom had left the company. They'd been planning this coup for at least 2 years, undermining Max's business relationships, siphoning information about bids and projects, methodically preparing to dismantle everything he'd built. But the most shocking revelation came in email from Judge Barrett to Victoria from 6 months ago. The trust stipulation is clear. If Max contests the divorce or threatens the family reputation, we can invoke Clause 14b. Harold may have included him as a beneficiary, but the moral turpitude clause gives us leverage. Once the divorce is filed, the family trust allocation reverts to you entirely. Max leaned back, stunned. Harold Barrett had included him in the family trust? Victoria and her family had concealed this from him for 3 years, all while planning to cut him out entirely. Just then, the front door opened. Max closed the laptop and moved to the hallway. Victoria stood in the entryway, eyes red but chin defiantly raised. I'm here to collect some things, she announced, as if entering a stranger's home. By all means, Max replied coldly. Though I'm curious which things you consider yours, considering you're trying to take everything. Victoria flinched. You have no idea what you're talking about. And Alex had no right to tell me I was about to be ambushed, to warn his father about a conspiracy. Max stepped closer. How long, Victoria? How long have you and Tom been planning this? This isn't about Tom, she snapped. The Westridge Project. My clients. The Barrett Trust Fund I never knew about. All coincidences. Victoria's composure cracked. You were never supposed to be included in Daddy's trust. It was his senility talking. That money belongs to our family. And what am I? Max asked quietly. An outsider who got lucky, she hissed. My mother was right about you all along. Crude. Unrefined. You never belonged in our world. Max nodded slowly. Then I'll build my own. But Victoria? He stepped closer, voice dangerously soft. You and Tom and your entire family are about to learn what happens when you corner someone with nothing left to lose. Fear flickered across her face before she masked it with contempt. Threats won't help your case, Max. We have everything in place. By this time next week, you'll be lucky to keep this house. After she left with her suitcases, Max returned to his office and picked up the phone. Greg, I need you to find someone. Diane Reed, Tom's wife. And I need everything you can get on Barrett Family Holdings, particularly Harold Barrett's trust. The game was changing. Max wasn't just fighting to keep what was his anymore. He was declaring war. Chapter 5, Alliance Formation. Diane Reed's house was smaller than Max had expected. A modest tutor in the older part of town, well-maintained but lacking the ostentation of new money. The woman who answered the door bore little resemblance to the confident socialite he remembered from company parties years ago. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Max Donovan," she said, surprise evident. "I didn't expect. Please come in." The living room featured moving boxes stacked against one wall. A half-empty bookshelf. Signs of a life being dismantled. "You're moving," Max observed. "Downsizing," Diane corrected, offering coffee which Max declined. "The house goes on the market next week. Tom says the maintenance is impractical now that it's just me." Max noted the bitterness in her voice. "You've heard about the graduation ceremony?" "Small town," Diane replied with a humorless smile. "Though Tom's version likely differs from reality. He hasn't told you about the divorce yet," Max said. "Not a question." Diane's hand trembled slightly as she set down her mug. "How did you?" "The same way I know about the Westridge project. About Victoria. About the Bear Trust Fund." Max held her gaze. "I know everything, Diane. And I suspect you do too." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Diane moved to a desk drawer and withdrew a thick folder. Bank statements. Property transfers. Evidence of, what do they call it? Dissipation of marital assets. She pushed the folder toward Max. "Tom thinks I'm still the naive faculty wife he married 15 years ago. He forgets I teach forensic accounting." Max raised an eyebrow. "You've been gathering evidence." "For over a year," Diane confirmed. "But evidence means nothing without leverage. The Reed name carries weight in this town. His father was mayor, his brother's on the county board. I'm just a childless wife who couldn't give him heirs. What if we combined our resources?" Max suggested. "Your evidence, my connections." Diane studied him carefully. "Tom says you're finished in this town. That by next month, redevelopment will control the Westridge project and most of your former clients." "Tom's overconfident," Max replied. "Always has been." "What are you proposing?" "An alliance. My attorney's already freezing assets and preparing countersuits. Your information could be invaluable. And what do I get in return?" Max smiled grimly. "What we both want. Justice. And enough financial security that neither of us ever has to worry about the Reed or Barrett families again." By that evening, Max had expanded his alliance. Gregory Winters had connected him with Sophia Patel, a forensic investigator specializing in financial fraud. Natalie Reeves continued providing insider information from redevelopment. And Diane had introduced him to her brother, Benjamin Harlow, a local news editor with a particular interest in corruption stories. They gathered in Greg's office after hours, spread across the conference table. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Oak Ridge's downtown, including the vacant Westridge block that Tom and Victoria believed would soon be theirs. "The Barrett family trust is significant," Sophia reported, sliding documents across the table. "Approximately $38 million in assets, including commercial properties throughout the county. Harold Barrett amended his will 3 years ago to include you as a beneficiary, 15% of the trust, which Victoria and Pamela Barrett concealed from you," Greg added. "That alone is actionable." "Judge Barrett's involvement complicates things," Benjamin noted. "He's been on the bench 20 years, has connections throughout the state judiciary." "Which is why we won't be fighting this in court," Max said. All eyes turned to him. "At least, not only in court." "What are you thinking?" Greg asked warily. Max laid out printouts from Natalie's flash drive. Tuesday night. First National Bank. Victoria, Tom, Judge Barrett, and Lawrence Foster are meeting to finalize financing for Westridge, using my anticipated business assets as collateral before they've even won them. "That's premature at best, potentially fraudulent," Sophia observed. "Exactly," Max agreed. "Benjamin, how would your paper feel about an exclusive on financial impropriety involving a sitting judge, a bank president, and $1 million development project?" Benjamin's eyes gleamed. "We'd feel very positive about it, but we'd need irrefutable evidence." "Which is why we'll be there," Max said. "All of us, with evidence in hand and witnesses ready to testify." The group spent hours refining the plan, identifying vulnerabilities, preparing contingencies. As they dispersed near midnight, Diane lingered. "This won't just hurt them professionally," she said quietly. "Are you prepared for the personal fallout? Victoria is still Alex's mother. Max's jaw tightened. Alex made his choice at graduation. He chose truth. And afterwards, when the dust settles, there won't be dust, Max replied. Only scorched earth. The next morning, Max received a certified letter, Victoria's divorce filing, citing irreconcilable differences and demanding 50% of all assets, including the business. The petition included a temporary restraining order barring Max from harassing or contacting Victoria or accessing certain business accounts. Max called Alex, who answered immediately. Dad, Mom's lawyers just called me. They want me to provide a statement about your emotional instability and threatening behavior. What did you tell them? To go to hell, Alex replied fiercely. Carson's dad is a psychologist. He's willing to provide a counter-assessment if needed. Max felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. This could get ugly, son. I don't want you caught in the crossfire. I'm already in it, Alex said firmly. And I choose your side. After hanging up, Max drove to the cemetery where his parents were buried. He stood at their simple headstones, wind rustling the oak trees overhead. I promised I'd never be like him, Max told his mother's grave. Never abandon my family. But I didn't abandon them. They betrayed me. He knelt, brushing leaves from the stone. I'm about to do things you might not approve of, but I can't let them win. Not after everything we sacrificed. As he stood to leave, his phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. Emergency meeting called at redevelopment. Victoria arrived in tears. Something about Harold Barrett's trust. They know you're onto them. Max smiled grimly as he walked back to his car. The game was accelerating. Chapter 6. The Strike. First National Bank's executive conference room occupied the top floor of Oak Ridge's tallest building. Glass walls offering panoramic views of the town Max had helped rebuild over 20 years. From the adjacent rooftop garden where Max now stood with Benjamin Harlow, they could see directly into the room while remaining hidden behind decorative greenery. They've arrived, Benjamin murmured, adjusting his camera lens. Inside, Lawrence Foster greeted Victoria, Tom, and Judge Barrett with handshakes and smiles. The banker's silver hair caught the evening sunlight as he gestured toward the presentation materials arranged on the conference table. Max checked his watch. Natalie, in position, came to reply through his earpiece. Audio recording devices activated under table positions 2 and 5. Diane. Lobby security has the documentation. They're reviewing it now. Sophia. Financial evidence packets delivered to board members' homes 30 minutes ago. 3 have already called emergency meetings with their attorneys. Max nodded, satisfaction coursing through him. Gregory. Judge Watkins signed the emergency injunction 10 minutes ago. Sheriff's deputies are en route. ETA 12 minutes. Everything was in place. The trap set. Inside the conference room, Tom Reed stood to begin his presentation, pointing to renderings of the Westridge development. Max's development, stolen and rebranded with the Reed Development logo. Victoria sat beside him, her hand occasionally brushing his arm. Their conspiracy now in the open. Showtime, Max murmured. Benjamin's camera clicked rapidly, capturing Judge Barrett nodding approvingly at financial projections that hinged on assets they didn't yet possess. Lawrence Foster making notes on documents that presumed the transfer of Max's company valuation to secure the financing. Natalie's voice came through the earpiece. They're discussing the Barrett Trust now. Judge Barrett is confirming that Max's portion has been successfully redirected to Victoria through the morality clause. Max's jaw tightened. Betrayal upon betrayal. Suddenly, the conference room door opened. A bank security officer entered, followed by Diane Reed and Sophia Patel. The conversation inside halted abruptly. Right on schedule, Max said with grim satisfaction. Through the glass, they watched Tom rise, face contorting with anger as he confronted his wife. Judge Barrett moved toward Sophia, who calmly handed him a document that made him sink back into his chair, face ashen. What's happening? Benjamin asked, still photographing. Sophia just served Judge Barrett with evidence that he deliberately concealed trust assets from a beneficiary, a felony in this state. And Diane is informing Tom that she's filed her own divorce petition, including evidence of his financial fraud. The scene inside deteriorated into chaos. Victoria stood, shouting at Diane. Tom jabbed a finger at the security officer, who remained impassive. Lawrence Foster frantically gathered documents, face pale with panic. Max's phone vibrated. A text from Gregory. Deputies arriving now. Injunction being served. Exit via east stairwell. Time to go, Max told Benjamin. You have what you need for tomorrow's paper? The editor grinned. Front page, guaranteed. Conspiracy to defraud. Judge, banker, and developer caught in act. As they left, Max glanced back for one final look. Victoria had collapsed into a chair, mascara streaking her cheeks. Their eyes met through the glass, and Max saw the moment she realized the architect of her downfall had been watching all along. He turned away without acknowledgement and descended the stairs. The next 48 hours unfolded with the precision of a masterfully orchestrated symphony. Benjamin's explosive front-page story sent shockwaves through Oak Ridge. Judge Barrett announced an immediate health-related leave of absence. Lawrence Foster was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Reed Development's Westridge financing collapsed as investors withdrew support. Max sat in his home office, watching local news coverage of Tom Reed being escorted from his building, jacket pulled over his face to avoid cameras. Victoria hadn't been seen publicly since the bank meeting. According to Alex, she'd retreated to her mother's estate, refusing all calls. Greg arrived with a bottle of scotch and 2 glasses. Preliminary injunction granted. All transfers from the Barrett Trust frozen, pending investigation. Your company assets secured. Max accepted the drink, but didn't celebrate. And the Westridge project? The city council's reconsidering all bids in light of the scandal. With Reed Development imploding, you're positioned as the stable, ethical alternative. Make sure Natalie Reeves gets that VP position we discussed, Max reminded him. And that Diane Reed receives the consulting contract. Greg nodded, studying his friend with concern. This is just the beginning, you know. Victoria's lawyers will regroup. The Barrett family has resources we haven't even touched. Let them come, Max replied calmly. This was just the opening move. Later that evening, as rain pattered against the windows, Max's doorbell rang. Victoria stood on the porch, rainwater dripping from her hair, makeup smudged, designer clothes rumpled. You've destroyed everything, she said, voice raw. No, Max corrected. I've merely returned what was taken from me. Your family, Tom. You all conspired to strip me of everything I built. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Victoria insisted. If you just agreed to a reasonable settlement. You mean surrender. Max, please. My mother's had a stress-induced collapse. Uncle Howard might be disbarred. Everything we've worked for. Everything I've worked for, Max interrupted coldly. While you were planning my destruction with Tom Reed. Victoria's facade cracked further. What do you want? To humiliate me more? To take everything? I want exactly what you and Tom and your family wanted. Max replied simply. Everything that's rightfully mine. Nothing more, nothing less. And us? 20 years of marriage. Max studied the woman he'd once loved, searching for any remnant of the person he'd built a life with. He found nothing. There is no us, Victoria. You ensured that the moment you conspired with Tom, the moment you hid my rightful inheritance, the moment you planned to ambush me at our son's graduation dinner. Victoria's shoulders slumped in defeat. You've won, then? No, Max said, already closing the door. I've merely survived. The winning comes next. As Victoria turned to leave, Max called after her. The Barrett family has 1 week to offer a complete settlement acknowledging my full entitlement to the trust. After that, what happened today will seem like a gentle warning. The door closed on her stunned expression. Chapter 7. Counterattack. 1 week passed with no word from the Barrett family or their attorneys. Max used the time strategically, consolidating his position. Natalie Reeves had been installed as Chief Operations Officer of his rebranded company, Donovan Construction and Development. Diane Reed provided financial consultation, her expertise helping restructure the company's assets to insulate them from future attacks. The Westridge project remained in limbo as the city council investigated the bidding process, But Max had already moved on to 3 smaller developments, ensuring his business continued to thrive despite the turmoil. Alex had returned home, throwing himself into summer work at the company before starting college in the fall. Father and son had grown even closer through the crisis, spending evenings discussing business strategy or working on their motorcycle restoration project. "Have you heard from Mom?" Alex asked one evening in the garage, hands greasy from adjusting the carburetor. "No," Max answered honestly. "Have you?" "She calls daily, texts constantly, so she can explain everything if I'll just meet her." Alex wiped his hands on a rag. "I haven't responded." Max studied his son's profile, so reminiscent of his own at that age. "She's still your mother, Alex. Whatever's happened between us doesn't change that." "It changes everything," Alex countered. "She was willing to destroy you, to lie to me my entire life. How can I trust anything she says now?" Before Max could respond, his phone rang. Gregory Winters. The Barrett family attorney called. Greg reported. "They want a meeting. Tomorrow, their offices, 10 a.m. After I gave them a 1-week deadline? Not happening," Max replied. "Our offices. 9 a.m. Non-negotiable." The following morning, the Barrett family contingent arrived precisely at 9 a.m. Pamela Barrett, thin and regal despite recent events. Judge Howard Barrett, his typical confidence diminished. Their attorney, Willis Montgomery, an elder statesman of Oak Ridge legal circles. And Victoria, pale but composed in conservative business attire. Conspicuously absent, Thomas Reed, who, according to Natalie's intelligence, was frantically trying to shore up his collapsing company while fighting Diane's increasingly aggressive divorce proceedings. Max had arranged the conference room strategically. He sat at the head of the table, Gregory to his right, Sophia Patel to his left. Behind him stood Benjamin Harlow, recorder in hand, and Natalie Reeves, whose presence visibly unsettled Victoria. "Thank you for coming," Max began formally. "I understand you have a settlement proposal." Willis Montgomery cleared his throat. "Before we begin, Mr. Donovan, we must insist that members of the press not be present during privileged settlement discussions." "Mr. Harlow is here as my personal media consultant," Max replied smoothly. "Ms. Reeves as my chief operating officer. Both have signed confidentiality agreements." The message was clear. Max would dictate terms, not the Barretts. Montgomery placed a document folder on the table. "We are prepared to offer a complete settlement of all outstanding matters between the Donovan and Barrett families." Max didn't reach for it. Summarized the key points. "The Barrett family acknowledges your entitlement to 15% of Harold Barrett's trust, approximately $5.7 million in assets. Mrs. Donovan is willing to forego any claim to Donovan Construction in exchange for the family home and a one-time settlement of $2 million. Max exchanged glances with Gregory, who gave an imperceptible nod. "Inadequate," Max stated flatly. "The trust percentage is correct, but your valuation is outdated. Current market value of the trust assets exceeds $45 million. Pamela Barrett's thin face flushed with anger. "Preposterous." Sophia Patel slid a financial analysis across the table. "The Barrett Commercial Properties portfolio alone is worth $28 million as of last quarter's assessment. The Lakeshore development adds another $12 million. Investment accounts approximately $5 million. And then there's the matter of the undisclosed offshore holdings in the Cayman Islands." Judge Barrett's face went slack. Victoria gasped audibly. "How did you—" Montgomery began, then caught himself. "The better question," Max continued calmly, "is why Harold Barrett established those accounts and why they weren't disclosed in the trust documentation." Gregory produced another document. "We've prepared a more accurate settlement proposal. Mrs. Donovan retains her personal property only. All marital assets revert to Mr. Donovan, including the family home. Mr. Donovan receives his full 15% of the Barrett Trust, properly valued, plus 5 years of retroactive distributions that were deliberately withheld. This is highway robbery." Pamela hissed. "No," Max corrected. "It's justice. But we're not finished." He turned to Judge Barrett. "Howard, Your involvement in concealing trust assets constitutes judicial misconduct at minimum, criminal conspiracy at worst. Your retirement papers are included in our settlement package. Sign them, and the evidence of your misconduct remains private. The judge's face contorted with rage. You dare threaten me? It's not a threat, Max replied. It's a consequence. Victoria, who had remained silent, finally spoke. And if we refuse these outrageous terms? Max smiled thinly. Then tomorrow morning, Benjamin's paper runs an expose on Harold Barrett's offshore accounts, their connection to 3 development projects with questionable permitting, and Judge Barrett's role in ensuring those projects faced no legal obstacles. Silence fell over the room. The Barrett family exchanged glances, decades of privilege and power crumbling before Max's methodical assault. You have until 5 p.m. today, Max concluded, standing to signal the meeting's end. After that, everything becomes public. As the Barrett delegation rose to leave, Victoria lingered. Max, please. This will destroy my family. The family that called me an outsider? That conspired to take everything from me. Max's voice remained steady. You made your choice, Victoria. These are the consequences. At 4:58 p.m., Gregory received the signed settlement documents. The Barrett family had capitulated on every point. Victory should have tasted sweet. Instead, as Max sat alone in his office that evening, he felt only a hollow satisfaction. The betrayal had been avenged, but 20 years of his life remained in ashes. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You've won the battle but created new enemies. Some secrets are worth dying for. TR. Max stared at the message from Tom Reed, feeling not fear, but anticipation. The war, it seemed, was not yet over. Chapter 8. The Buried Truth. The text from Tom Reed proved to be more than an idle threat. 3 days after the Barrett family settlement, Max arrived at a job site to find critical equipment vandalized, causing thousands in damages and weeks of delays. A week later, 2 key investors suddenly withdrew from a development project without explanation. Then building permits for the Westridge development, finally awarded to Donovan Construction, were mysteriously lost in the city system. It's Reed, Natalie confirmed after investigating. He's calling in every favor, leveraging every connection to sabotage your recovery. Max had expected retaliation, but the scope of Reed's campaign surprised even him. The man was fighting like someone with nothing to lose, or something substantial to protect. There's more to this than a failed affair and business rivalry, Max told Gregory as they reviewed the mounting evidence of interference. Tom's message mentioned secrets worth dying for. What are we missing? The answer came from an unexpected source. Diane Reed requested an urgent meeting at a coffee shop outside town, away from familiar eyes. I found something while clearing out Tom's home office, she said without preamble, sliding a USB drive across the table. Financial records going back 10 years. Transactions between Barrett Commercial Properties and redevelopment that predate Tom's official partnership with Victoria. Max's eyes narrowed. How far back? 8 years, Diane replied. Long before he left your company. The amount starts small, but grows substantially about 5 years ago. When Victoria and I were having marriage problems, Max noted, when she started those weekend retreats. Diane hesitated. There's more. Personal emails between Tom and Harold Barrett from 6 years ago. They discuss a development called Project Phoenix. Max frowned. Never heard of it. Because it never officially existed, Diane explained. It was the code name for a land acquisition scheme. They were buying properties through shell companies before announcing major infrastructure projects that would increase land values. Using insider information from Judge Barrett about upcoming county developments, Max realized. Illegal insider trading, essentially. Exactly. The most recent was the Lakeshore Tract, purchased for $3 million through shell companies, rezoned with Judge Barrett's help, then sold to Barrett Commercial for $12 million. Max leaned back, pieces clicking into place. And Victoria became involved after her father brought her in. According to the emails, she was reluctant at first but eventually embraced the scheme. She was the one who suggested bringing you in as an unwitting partner in some of the developments. The betrayal cut deeper than Max had imagined. Not just an affair, not just a divorce ambush, but years of manipulation, using him and his company's reputation to legitimize their illegal operations. Does Tom know you have this? No, Diane answered. But he knows something's missing. That's why he's escalating against you. He's terrified you'll discover the full extent of the conspiracy. Max spent the night reviewing the files from Diane, each revelation stoking the cold fury that had replaced his initial shock. The corruption ran deep. Harold Barrett, Judge Barrett, Tom Reed, and eventually Victoria, all participants in a years-long scheme that had generated millions in fraudulent profits. And Max had been the perfect front, the self-made success story whose reputation for integrity had helped shield their activities from scrutiny. Dawn found him still at his desk when Alex appeared in the doorway, concern etched on his young face. "You haven't slept," his son observed. "No," Max admitted, "but I found answers." He explained the discoveries, watching Alex's expression shift from disbelief to disgust. "So Mom wasn't just cheating with Tom," Alex said slowly. "She was part of a criminal conspiracy. For years," Max confirmed, "using our family, my business, as cover." Alex was quiet for a long moment. "What are you going to do?" "End it," Max replied simply. "Completely." The plan took shape over the next week. Sophia Patel compiled the financial evidence into a comprehensive report. Benjamin Harlow prepared a series of articles detailing the corruption. Gregory filed sealed court documents that would be released at the strategic moment. But Max needed one final piece to complete the puzzle: confirmation from someone inside the conspiracy. Someone who could testify to the knowing participation of all parties. That someone, surprisingly, turned out to be Pamela Barrett. "She's facing financial ruin," Natalie reported after making discreet inquiries. "The trust assets are frozen, pending your settlement. Judge Barrett's retirement has cut off their legal protection. Victoria is spending what liquid assets remain on private security after Tom's threats escalated. Offer her immunity and financial security," Max instructed, "in exchange for everything she knows about Project Phoenix, Harold Barrett's offshore accounts, and Victoria's involvement." Pamela Barrett agreed to meet at her estate, once a showcase of old money elegance, now feeling neglected as financial pressures mounted. The grand entrance hall, with its sweeping staircase, still impressed, but Max noticed the subtle signs of decline: postponed maintenance, fewer staff, emptier rooms. "I always told Harold you were sharper than you appeared," Pamela said by way of greeting, leading him to a sitting room far from where servants might overhear. "He underestimated you." "We all did. A common mistake," Max replied, declining her offer of tea. "I understand you're willing to provide information about Project Phoenix." Pamela's aristocratic features hardened. "For the right considerations. Full immunity from prosecution. A guaranteed income from what remains of your portion of the trust after my settlement. Protection from Tom Reed." "And Victoria?" Pamela asked, a mother despite everything. "I'll ensure she's not destitute," Max conceded. "But she will face consequences." Pamela nodded slowly, resignation in every line of her body. "Harold started it. After the recession hit our legitimate investments hard. Just small manipulations at first. Howard ensuring favorable rulings, advance notice of county projects." "When did Victoria become involved?" 5 years ago, after she discovered what was happening." Pamela's gaze fixed on a family portrait above the fireplace. Harold, Howard, Victoria, herself, all smiling confidently. "She was outraged initially. Threatened to tell you everything." "What changed?" "Tom Reed," Pamela said bitterly. "He was already working with Harold while still at your company. He convinced Victoria that the family legacy was at stake, that you would never understand necessary business practices with your rigid ethical standards." The contempt in her voice when describing his ethics told Max everything about the value system that had shaped Victoria. And the affair began as business, evolved into something more. Victoria convinced herself she deserved better than a man who didn't understand how the world really works. Pamela's laugh was brittle, as if corruption and insider trading were simply sophisticated business practices. By the time Max left, he had Pamela's signed affidavit detailing the entire conspiracy, names, dates, amounts, methods. The final piece of his retribution. That night, he called a meeting of his allies at his home. Gregory, Sophia, Benjamin, Natalie, and Diane gathered in his living room as he outlined the endgame. Tomorrow, everything goes public, Max explained. Benjamin's expose in the morning. Sophia's financial report released to state regulators. Gregory's sealed indictments unsealed. The fallout will be nuclear, Gregory warned. The Barrett name, redevelopment, half the county's business elite, all implicated. Good, Max said simply. What about Victoria? Diane asked quietly. Max's expression remained impassive. She made her choices. She lives with the consequences. Later, as the others departed, Alex joined Max on the back porch. Father and son sat in silence, watching the stars emerge over the property Victoria had tried to take. Will this be enough? Alex finally asked. Will it ever feel finished? Max considered the question carefully. It's not about feeling finished. It's about justice, about consequences for choices. And forgiveness? Some betrayals can't be forgiven, Max replied. Only survived. As if summoned by their conversation, Max's phone lit up with Victoria's number. After weeks of silence from his estranged wife, the timing seemed almost prescient. Alex saw the caller ID. Are you going to answer? Max stared at the phone, then declined the call. No. Whatever she has to say, it's too late. The phone immediately rang again. And again. On the fourth attempt, unease pricked at Max's consciousness. He answered, putting the call on speaker. Victoria's voice came through, shaking with terror. Max, help me. Tom's here. He has a gun. He says if I testify against him, he'll... Her voice cut off with a scream. Then Tom Reed's voice, slurred with alcohol or drugs. Should have minded your own business, Donovan. Some secrets are worth killing for. The call ended abruptly. Max was already moving, car keys in hand. Call the police, he instructed Alex. Tell them armed intruder at your mother's condo. Then call Gregory. Despite everything, Victoria was still Alex's mother, still the woman he'd once built a life with. And Max Donovan was not a man who would leave anyone at the mercy of a desperate criminal, even someone who had betrayed him. The night had one final revelation to deliver. One final test of the man Max had become in the crucible of betrayal. Chapter 9. Ashes to Foundation. Max drove through Oak Ridge's darkened streets with focused intensity, hands steady on the wheel despite the chaos unfolding. Police sirens wailed in the distance, responding to Alex's call, but Max knew he was closer to Victoria's downtown condo than any patrol unit. His mind calculated coldly as he drove. Tom Reed was cornered, his business collapsing, his reputation in tatters, his illegal activities about to be exposed. A desperate man, possibly intoxicated, armed, and with nothing left to lose. The most dangerous kind of enemy. Max parked a block from Victoria's building and approached cautiously, staying in shadows. The luxury high-rise security system would normally prevent unauthorized entry, but Max still had the access code Victoria hadn't changed. Another oversight in her unraveling life. The lobby was deserted at this late hour. Max bypassed the elevator, too noisy, too obvious, and took the emergency stairs two at a time to the 14th floor. The hallway was silent when he emerged. No signs of disturbance. No curious neighbors investigating commotion. Outside Victoria's door, Max paused, listening. Muffled voices inside. Tom's aggression, Victoria's fear. The crash of something valuable breaking. Max tried the door handle. Locked. He stepped back, considering options. Breaking down the door would alert Reed, potentially escalating an already volatile situation. Waiting for police risked Victoria's life if Reed's desperation peaked. His phone vibrated silently. Alex. Police are 5 minutes out, his son reported in a tense whisper. Gregory's contacted a judge for an emergency warrant. Diane says Tom keeps a backup gun in his glove compartment. Stay put, Max instructed. I'm outside her door now. Dad, wait for the police. Max ended the call and dialed Victoria's number, switching his phone to silent immediately after. From inside the condo, he heard her ringtone, the chiming melody they danced to at their wedding 20 years ago. Tom's voice shouted, Don't answer that. The distraction was enough. Max retrieved the emergency key Victoria had always kept hidden in a magnetic box behind the hallway fire extinguisher. Some habits never changed. The door opened silently on well-maintained hinges. Max slipped inside, cataloging the scene in seconds. Victoria pinned to the living room wall by Tom Reed, whose back was to the door. A handgun dangled from Tom's right hand as he shouted incoherently, his left forearm pressed against Victoria's throat. She saw Max first, eyes widening with a mix of terror and disbelief. Tom, lost in his rage, didn't notice. "Think I'll let you destroy me?" Tom was saying, alcohol heavy on his breath. "Everything I built? Everything we planned." Max moved silently across the room, stopping only when he reached an antique floor lamp, a Barrett family heirloom Victoria had always prized. Without hesitation, he grasped its heavy brass base and swung. The impact sent Tom Reed crashing to the floor, the gun skittering under a sofa. Victoria collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath, red marks blooming on her throat. Tom rolled on his back, dazed but conscious, blood seeping from a gash on his temple. Recognition dawned in his eyes as Max stood over him. "Donovan," he slurred. "Should have known you'd play hero." "Not a hero," Max replied evenly, retrieving the gun from under the sofa. "Just finishing what you started." Tom's laugh held no humor. "Finishing? You have no idea what you've stumbled into. The Barretts, the development deals, that's just the surface. There's more. Things that would destroy this whole town if they came out." Victoria pushed herself upright, voice raspy from Tom's assault. "He's lying," Max trying to save himself. "Am I?" Tom challenged, eyes never leaving Max's. "Tell him about the Westbrook fire, Victoria. Tell him who really arranged it. Tell him why your father approved developments on land that should have been condemned." Max's grip tightened on the gun. The Westbrook fire, an apartment complex that had burned 8 years ago, killing 3 residents. The investigation had blamed faulty wiring. The property had been redeveloped by Barrett Commercial thereafter. Insurance fraud and involuntary manslaughter, Max realized aloud. Is that what Harold Barrett was hiding in those offshore accounts? Payoffs to inspectors? To investigators? Victoria's face had gone ashen. "Max, please." Sirens wailed outside, coming closer. Tom struggled to sit up, blood dripping down his face. "You won, Donovan. Destroyed me, destroyed the Barretts. But what will you tell your precious son when he learns his grandfather was a murderer? When he learns his mother knew about it all along?" Police pounded on the door, shouting instructions. Max looked at Victoria, this stranger he'd once loved, mother of his child, complicit in corruption beyond what he'd imagined. "Max," Victoria whispered, reaching for him. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. No one was supposed to get hurt in the fire. I never knew until after." "Save it for your statement," Max said, stepping away from her touch. "Tell the police everything, Victoria, every last detail, or I'll make sure Alex knows exactly what his Barrett heritage really means." The police burst in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Max carefully placed the gun on the floor and raised his hands. "He saved my life," Victoria said immediately, pointing at Tom. "He's the one who broke in with a gun." Max stopped him. Hours later, after police statements and medical examinations, Max sat in his car outside the police station. Gregory had handled the legal complexities, ensuring Max faced no charges for his intervention. Tom Reed had been arrested for breaking and entering, assault, illegal possession of a firearm, and a host of other charges that would keep him in prison for years. But Max felt no triumph, only exhaustion, and an unexpected emptiness where his hunger for revenge had burned. His phone rang. Alex again. "Is Mom okay?" his son asked immediately. "Physically, yes," Max answered truthfully. "She's giving her statement now. About everything." "Everything," Alex echoed, understanding the implications. "Yes. When she's done, there won't be any Barrett family legacy left to protect." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Alex spoke, his young voice suddenly older. "What happens now, Dad?" It was the question Max had been avoiding. With his revenge complete, his enemies neutralized, what remained? An empire built on the ashes of betrayal? A life defined by what he'd lost rather than what he'd built? We start over, Max said, surprising himself with the answer. Not forgetting, but not letting it consume us either. 3 months later, Max stood on the grounds of the newly renamed Phoenix Heights development, formerly the Westridge Project. Construction crews swarmed across the site, transforming abandoned buildings into what would become a mixed-use community with affordable housing at its core. Diane Reed had been instrumental in the redesign, her financial insights helping create a project that would generate profits while serving the community. Natalie Reeves oversaw operations with impressive efficiency. Benjamin Harlow's newspaper had become a champion for transparency in local government following his Barrett expose. Victoria had avoided prison by cooperating fully with authorities, revealing the extent of the Barrett family's corruption. She'd moved to another state, maintaining limited contact with Alex through carefully monitored video calls. The divorce had been finalized without contest. Judge Barrett had not been so fortunate. Facing multiple federal charges, he'd accepted a plea deal but still faced years in prison. Pamela Barrett, true to her aristocratic roots, had fled to Europe before charges could be filed, leaving behind the family name and fortune she'd once valued above all else. Mr. Donovan, a young architect, approached, plans in hand. We've finalized the community center design. It incorporates those changes you suggested for the youth programs. Max reviewed the drawings and nodded approval. Perfect. And the scholarship fund? The Donovan Foundation paperwork is complete. The first scholarships will be awarded next fall. Alex joined them, having deferred college for a year to work alongside his father in rebuilding not just the business, but its purpose. At 18, he carried himself with a confidence beyond his years, tempered by the harsh lessons of the past months. The Barrett name will represent something different now. Alex had told Max when they decided to create the foundation using a portion of Max's trust inheritance. Something built rather than taken. As the architect departed, father and son stood surveying the construction site, a metaphor for their own reconstruction after the earthquake of betrayal. Any regrets? Alex asked quietly. Max considered the question carefully. The revenge he'd executed had been complete, devastating to those who'd betrayed him. He'd shown no mercy, accepted no excuses, forgiven no transgressions. He'd reclaimed everything taken from him and more. Yet the victory had revealed a truth he hadn't expected. The man who emerged from vengeance was not the same man who had entered it. Harder in some ways, perhaps wiser in others. No regrets, Max answered finally. Just lessons about what to build next and who to build it with. As they walked back toward the construction trailers, Max's phone buzzed with a text from Gregory. Final Barrett property auction complete. Trust dissolution finished. It's officially over. Max read the message, then deleted it without responding. Some chapters needed to be closed completely. The sun set over Phoenix Heights, casting long shadows from the steel frameworks rising from what had once been ruins. Not just a development, but a statement. That from destruction could come creation. From betrayal, purpose. From endings, new beginnings. Max Donovan had lost a life built on false foundations. But in its place, he was constructing something stronger. Something true. Not forgiveness. Never that. But perhaps, finally, freedom. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Trust. Montgomery Monty Pierce had always lived by a code. As a former Navy intelligence officer turned successful security consultant, his life was built on 3 pillars: loyalty, discipline, and consequence. At 52, his salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes betrayed the intensity that had served him well both in military operations and civilian life. His security firm, Sentinel Shield, provided high-level protection services to wealthy clients and corporations, making him a wealthy man himself. The lakeside mansion in Connecticut where he now lived alone was a testament to his success and a reminder of his failures. The family photos had long been removed, but the memories remained etched in the walls. 15 years ago, Monty had discovered his wife Vivian's affair with Boyd Kessler, a charming art dealer who had wormed his way into their social circle. I should have seen it coming, Monty often thought during his early morning runs around the property. The signs were there, the late nights, the mysterious text messages, the sudden interest in art exhibitions. But he had trusted her implicitly, believed their 20-year marriage was unbreakable. The divorce had been brutal but swift. Monty had evidence, not just of the affair, but of Vivian's attempts to transfer joint assets to separate accounts. Always the strategist, he had moved preemptively, protecting most of his wealth while ensuring she received a fair settlement. He wasn't vindictive then, just practical. Their daughter Natalie had been 17 at the time of the divorce. Initially, she had sided with Monty, appalled by her mother's betrayal. But over time, Vivian's manipulative narrative had taken hold. "Your father was always absent, married to his work," she would tell Natalie. "Boyd gives me the attention and love I deserve." Now, at 32, Natalie had built a successful career as a pharmaceutical sales representative. 3 months ago, she had announced her engagement to Preston Redmond, a financial advisor with slick manners and a Harvard MBA. Monty had immediately sensed something off about Preston. The way his smile never reached his eyes, how he calculated every word in conversation. But for Natalie's sake, he had kept his reservations to himself. "Dad, can we meet for lunch?" Natalie had asked over the phone one spring afternoon. "There's something important I want to discuss." They met at Alessandro's, an upscale Italian restaurant in Hartford. Natalie looked radiant in her professional attire, her auburn hair, so like her mother's, framing her face. "Preston and I have been planning our wedding," she began after ordering. "It's going to be at the Rosewood Estate. We've always dreamed of a magical summer wedding." Monty smiled, genuinely happy to see her excitement. Despite everything, he loved his daughter deeply. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart." Natalie fidgeted with her napkin. "The thing is, Dad, weddings are so expensive nowadays. And Preston and I are saving for our dream house in Greenwich." Monty immediately understood where this was heading. "You need help with the expenses? Would you be willing to contribute?" Her eyes, so like his own, looked at him pleadingly. "About $22,000 would cover the venue and catering. It would mean the world to us." He studied her face. There was something rehearsed about her plea, but he pushed the thought aside. "Of course I'll help. You're my only daughter." Relief washed over her face. "Thank you, Dad. And there's one more thing." She hesitated. "Mom and Boyd would like to be involved in the planning. I know things are difficult between you, but—" "It's your wedding, Natalie," Monty interrupted, his voice even. "I won't cause any problems." What Natalie didn't know was that Monty had already received intelligence about Boyd Kessler. His security firm had recently been approached by a wealthy collector who suspected fraud in the art world, and Boyd's name had surfaced in the investigation. Nothing concrete yet, but enough to raise flags. Monty had kept this information compartmentalized, a professional habit that had served him well. As the wedding planning progressed over the next few months, Monty noticed the growing distance between himself and his daughter. Invitations to participate in preparations were scarce, while Vivian and Boyd seemed to be deeply involved. When he did receive updates, they were mostly about costs and payment schedules. Russell Blackburn, Monty's closest friend and former military colleague who now worked at Sentinel Shield, had noticed his darkening mood. "Something's off with this whole wedding situation," Monty confided during their weekly poker night. "I feel like I'm being managed." Russell, a burly man with a tactical mind as sharp as Monty's, frowned. "Trust your instincts. They've saved our lives more than once." Monty nodded, a plan already forming in his mind. "I think it's time for a little reconnaissance." Chapter 2. Whispers of Deception. The wedding preparations accelerated as summer approached. Monty maintained his distance, as requested, but kept himself informed through subtle means. He had Xavier Donovan, a tech specialist at his firm, monitors social media activities surrounding the wedding party, all legally obtained from public posts. "Sir, you might want to see this," Xavier said one afternoon, showing Monty photos from a private dinner at Le Bernardin in New York. Preston, Natalie, Vivian, and Boyd were celebrating something, champagne glasses raised high. The caption read, "Planning the future with those who truly matter." Monty's jaw tightened. He hadn't been invited or even informed about this dinner. "There's more," Xavier hesitated. "Financial data you asked me to monitor shows large transfers from Boyd Kessler to Preston Redmond over the past 6 months. Around $150,000 total. Business deal?" Monty questioned. "Possibly, but the transfers are structured to avoid reporting requirements, and they coincide with significant withdrawals from accounts Natalie shares with Preston." Monty's instincts flared. This wasn't just about being excluded from wedding planning. Something more calculated was happening. The following weekend, Natalie invited Monty to her apartment to discuss final wedding arrangements. The $22,000 had already been transferred, but now she seemed nervous. "Preston's parents can't contribute as much as they planned," she explained, not quite meeting his eyes. "We might need another $8,000 for the honeymoon." Monty studied his daughter carefully. The slight tremor in her hands, the practiced pitch in her voice, signs he recognized from years of interrogation training. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Whatever you need." Her relief was palpable. "You're the best, Dad." "I'm sorry, Mom and Boyd have been so involved. It's just easier since they live closer to the venue." "I understand," he said, though he didn't. His home was actually 15 minutes closer to the Rosewood estate than theirs. After leaving Natalie's apartment, Monty called Russell. "I need surveillance on the rehearsal dinner. Nothing invasive, just audio in the private dining room." Russell didn't question him. Their years together had built unshakable trust. "Consider done. I'll handle it personally." The night before the rehearsal dinner, Monty received another call for Natalie. "Dad, I hate to ask this," she began, her voice honeyed in a way that reminded him painfully of Vivian. "But Preston and I found the perfect property in Greenwich. If we don't make a deposit by next week, we'll lose it. Could you possibly help with $50,000? We'll pay you back once Preston's commission comes through." Monty felt a cold clarity descend over him. "Send me the details of the property. I'll have my financial advisor look it over." "Oh, that's not necessary." "I insist," he said firmly. "If I'm investing in your future home, I want to make sure it's a sound investment." After hanging up, he asked Xavier to investigate the property. The results came back within hours. There was no property in Greenwich being considered by Preston and Natalie. The address provided belonged to a long-term holding of Boyd Kessler's art gallery. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture Monty had suspected but hoped wasn't true. His daughter, the ex-wife, her lover, and the fiancé, all conspiring against him. The rehearsal dinner was held at the elegant Blue Water Grill, overlooking the Connecticut River. Monty arrived precisely on time, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit. He played his part perfectly, the proud father, gracious despite being seated at a table far from the main party, mostly with distant relatives and colleagues of Preston. Halfway through the dinner, he excused himself and met Russell in the restaurant service corridor. "Everything's set," Russell confirmed, handing him a small earpiece. "Audio is crystal clear." Monty inserted the device discreetly and returned to his table, now able to hear the conversation at the main table where Preston, Natalie, Vivian, and Boyd sat with Preston's parents. For 20 minutes, the conversation was mundane, wedding details, honeymoon plans, and side jokes. Then, as the dessert was served and champagne flowed freely, Preston leaned in closer to Natalie, not realizing his voice was being captured. "Once we get that final check from your dad, that's it," Preston murmured, his voice slightly slurred from alcohol. "Your dad's just an ATM. We'll cut him off after. Then we'll practically replace him with your mom's lover." Natalie giggled, casting a glance toward Monty's distant table. "Boyd's been more of a father to me anyway, and he knows how to turn this wedding investment into something worthwhile." Vivian chimed in, her voice low but clear. "Montgomery always was easy to manipulate. Flash a little family sentiment, and he opens his wallet. the security consultant who can't see what's right in front of him. Boyd's cultured voice added, "Once we leverage his contribution for the gallery expansion, he'll never know." The old military man still thinks in straight lines, not seeing the game around him. Preston raised his glass in a mock toast. "To Montgomery Pierce, the gift that keeps on giving." Monty sat perfectly still, his face betraying nothing as the laughter from the main table washed over him. Inside, something fundamental shifted. The cold calculation he had reserved for professional adversaries now turned toward his own family. As the dinner concluded, he approached the main table with warm smiles and congratulated the happy couple. "I'm looking forward to tomorrow," he said, embracing Natalie. "It will certainly be a day none of us will forget." Later that night, in the silent darkness of his home office, Monty made a series of phone calls. By dawn, everything was arranged. What had been planned as a wedding day would instead become a reckoning. His last call was to the Rosewood Estates manager, Florence Sullivan, an old client who owed him a significant favor after his firm had discreetly resolved a blackmail attempt against her family. "Florence, I need the Rosewood tomorrow morning." "Empty. No staff, no preparations, nothing. But Mr. Pierce, your daughter's wedding, will not be happening as planned," he finished for her. "Trust me when I say this is necessary. I'll compensate everyone affected." After a pause, she agreed. "Very well. The estate will be empty when they arrive." Monty ended the call and opened his safe, removing a file marked contingency. Inside were documents he had prepared years ago, but never expected to use against his own blood. "So be it," he whispered to the empty room. Chapter 3. The Empty Venue. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. Monty dressed methodically in his finest suit, checking his watch with military precision. By now, the wedding party would be discovering the empty venue. No decorations, no caterers, no guests being seated in white chairs on the manicured lawn. His phone rang precisely at 9:17 a.m. Natalie's name flashed on the screen. "Dad!" Her voice was frantic, bordering on hysterical. "Something terrible has happened. The venue is empty. Everything's gone. The wedding coordinator isn't answering. The caterers say they were canceled. Even the flowers are missing." "That's concerning," Monty replied, his voice calm. "Where are you now?" "At the Rosewood. Mom and Boyd are here too, and Preston's having a meltdown. Can you come right away? We need to figure out what happened." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Monty arrived at the Rosewood estate to find chaos. Natalie was in tears, her wedding dress hanging forgotten in a garment bag. Preston was shouting into his phone, his face flushed with anger. Vivian was attempting to comfort their daughter while Boyd paced nervously, repeatedly checking his own phone. "Montgomery, thank God," Vivian exclaimed when she saw him. "This is a disaster. Everything's gone." Monty surveyed the scene with calculated detachment. "Has anyone contacted the venue management?" "They're not answering." Preston snapped. "This is completely unprofessional. We're going to sue them for everything they've got." "Perhaps I can help," Monty offered. "Florence Sullivan, the estate manager, is an old client. Let me call her directly." He stepped aside, pretending to make a call, then returned moments later. "Florence is on her way. She says there's been a terrible misunderstanding. In the meantime, she's offered us the use of the main house for a private discussion." Relief visibly washed over the group as they followed Monty into the elegant mansion. He led them to a spacious library where, to their surprise, an elderly gentleman in a tailored suit was waiting. "Who is this?" Boyd demanded. "This is Theodore Winters, my attorney," Monty explained smoothly. "Given the circumstances, I thought legal counsel might be useful." The tension in the room shifted instantly from confusion to wariness. "Dad, what's going on?" Natalie asked, her voice small. Monty gestured for everyone to sit. "I believe we should discuss what really happened to the wedding arrangements." Preston stepped forward aggressively. "What does that mean? Do you know something about this disaster?" "I know everything, Preston," Monty replied, his voice now steel beneath silk. "About the conversations you've had, about the plans you've made, about the money transfers between Boyd and you, about the non-existent Greenwich property." The color drained from Preston's face. Natalie looked between her fiancé and her father, confusion giving way to fear. Dad, I don't understand. Let me clarify, Monty interrupted, nodding to Theodore, who opened a leather portfolio and produced several documents. Last night at the rehearsal dinner, I heard everything. About being just an ATM to be cut off after the wedding. About replacing me with Boyd. About leveraging my contribution for the gallery expansion. Vivian stood up, her face a mask of indignation. You were spying on us? How dare you? Spare me the outrage, Vivian. It doesn't suit you after 15 years of lies. Monty's voice remained unervingly calm. The wedding isn't happening today. In fact, it's not happening at all. You can't do that, Preston shouted. The guests are on their way. No, they're not, Monty corrected him. All guests received a cancellation notice last night, citing a family emergency. The venue, caterers, florists, everything was canceled with generous compensation for their inconvenience. The shock in the room was palpable. Natalie began to cry again, but these were different tears, tears of exposure and guilt. Why would you do this? She whispered. Because actions have consequences, Monty stated simply. He turned to Theodore, who handed him another document. This is what you'll find in place of a wedding today. He placed the document on the coffee table. The heading read, Termination of financial support and legal notice of intent to pursue fraud charges. What is this? Boyd demanded, finally finding his voice. Evidence, Monty replied, of an elaborate plan to defraud me of significant funds through emotional manipulation and false pretenses. The $22,000 for the wedding was just the beginning. The additional $8,000 for a honeymoon that was already paid for by Boyd. The $50,000 deposit for a non-existent property. And the plans to extract much more. He faced his daughter directly. Natalie, did you really think I wouldn't investigate the Greenwich property? That I wouldn't notice the multiple transfers from Boyd to Preston that coincidentally matched your withdrawal patterns? Preston lunged forward suddenly, grabbing the document. This is ridiculous. You have no proof. On the contrary, Monty replied, unfazed by the outburst. Theodore, please play the recording. The attorney pressed a button on his phone, and the clear voices from the rehearsal dinner filled the room. Your dad's just an ATM. We'll cut him off after. Then we'll practically replace him with your mom's lover. Preston went pale. Natalie covered her mouth in horror. Vivian and Boyd exchanged panicked glances. That's not admissible. Boyd recovered first, his art dealer's smooth voice attempting to regain control. Recordings without consent aren't legal in Connecticut. Monty smiled coldly. Normally, you'd be right. But the Blue Water Grill has posted notices about security recordings on the premises, and all patrons give implied consent upon entering. A technicality, perhaps, but one that works in my favor. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. There will be no criminal charges filed today. No public scandal, yet. Instead, there will be consequences that are private, but significant. He handed each of them a separate document. These detail what happens next for each of you. I suggest you read them carefully. As they hesitantly took the papers, the door opened, and Florence Sullivan entered with several security personnel from Sentinel Shield. These gentlemen will escort you from the property once you've read your documents, Monty explained. I'll give you privacy to absorb the information. As he turned to leave, Natalie grabbed his arm. Dad, please, it wasn't my idea. Preston and Boyd convinced me. That's the most disappointing part. Natalie, Monty interrupted, gently removing her hand. You didn't need convincing. You chose this. With that, he walked out, closing the door behind him. In the empty great hall of the Rosewood estate, he finally allowed himself a moment of grief for the family he had lost. Not today, but years ago when betrayal first entered their lives. The difference was that now, he would no longer deny the truth or seek reconciliation. Now, there would only be justice. Chapter 4. The Architect of Vengeance. The aftermath of the wedding that never was spread through their social circles like wildfire. The official story, a private family matter requiring postponement, fooled no one. Rumors multiplied, ranging from cold feet to financial disputes. Monty remained silent, neither confirming nor denying any speculation. 3 days after the Rosewood estate confrontation, Monty sat in his home office with Russell and Xavier, reviewing the initial fallout. "Preston's tried to contact you 17 times, Xavier reported, scrolling through his tablet. "Natalie, 23. Vivian, 5. Boyd hasn't called directly, but his lawyer has reached out twice." "And the documents?" Monty asked. Russell nodded. "Delivered and legally binding." They're scrambling to understand the full implications. What Monty had given each of them at the Rosewood were not simply threats, but meticulously crafted legal documents, each tailored to their specific vulnerabilities. For Preston, it was evidence of his financial improprieties, not just the scheme against Monty, but a pattern of questionable practices with client funds that would interest both his firm's compliance department and the Securities and Exchange Commission. The document outlined exactly how this information would be deployed if he attempted any retaliation or contact. For Natalie, it was the painful revelation that her trust fund, established by Monty's parents before their death, was now being redirected to veterans' charities. While legally he couldn't reclaim past distributions, the substantial remaining balance would never reach her. Additionally, her position at the pharmaceutical company, which had come through Monty's connection with the CEO, was now precarious at best. For Vivian, it was the exposure of her systematic efforts to turn Natalie against Monty over the years, documented through emails, texts, and recorded phone conversations, all obtained legally, but devastatingly effective if revealed to their remaining mutual friends and family. Her carefully crafted image as the wronged wife would crumble, along with the social standing she so cherished. For Boyd, it was the most dangerous document of all, a comprehensive file on his art dealings, including evidence of provenance manipulation, authentication fraud, and tax evasion. Monty had been building this file for years, initially as a protective measure, now as leverage. "They underestimated you," Russell observed. "They thought you were just a heartbroken ex-husband and sentimental father." Monty's face remained impassive, a common mistake. People see what they expect to see. "What's your next move?" Xavier asked. "Now we wait," Monty replied. "Let them absorb the reality of their situation. Real panic takes time to develop." The call came that evening, not from any of the four, but from Loretta Masterson, Boyd's gallery assistant and Vivian's longtime friend. Her voice was tense, attempting but failing to sound casual. "Montgomery, I hope I'm not disturbing you." Vivian and Boyd were wondering if you might meet them for dinner tomorrow. A chance to discuss recent events privately. "The Willows, 7 p.m., Monty replied without hesitation. "Just the three of us." The Willows was a secluded restaurant known for its private dining rooms and discretion, a place where difficult conversations could remain confidential. It was also a venue where Sentinel Shield had installed the security systems, giving Monty a particular advantage. "I'm not going in blind," Monty told Russell the next day as they prepared. "I want full surveillance capabilities and a backup team nearby." Russell nodded, handing him a sleek fountain pen. "New prototype from our R&D department. Records audio and transmits to our secure server. The clip contains a panic button if needed." Monty arrived at the Willows precisely at 7 p.m. Vivian and Boyd were already seated in a private room, tension evident in their postures despite their attempt at composure. Vivian had aged well, her blonde hair now expertly highlighted to disguise the gray, her face maintained through subtle procedures. Boyd remained handsome in that cultivated way of men who prioritize appearance, tailored clothes, perfect haircut, manicured hands. "Montgomery," Vivian greeted him, her voice softer than it had been in years. "Thank you for coming." "Let's skip the pleasantries," Monty replied, taking a seat. "You want to talk? So talk." Boyd cleared his throat. What happened at the Rosewood was unfortunate. Things were said at the rehearsal dinner that were inappropriate and untrue. Alcohol and pre-wedding stress led to poor judgment. "Is that your position?" Monty asked coldly. "That I should dismiss conspiracy and fraud as drunken banter?" "We're not here to argue semantics," Vivian interjected. "We're here to find a solution that works for everyone. The situation with Natalie is destroying her. She's devastated." "As she should be," Monty replied without emotion. "Actions have consequences." That's something I learned in the military and something all of you are now learning. Boyd leaned forward. Be reasonable, Montgomery. This vendetta serves no one. We're prepared to make amends, financially and otherwise. Monty allowed a small, dangerous smile. You misunderstand the situation. This isn't a negotiation. I'm not interested in your money or your apologies. Then what do you want? Vivian demanded, her facade of contrition slipping. Justice, Monty stated simply, and to ensure none of you can ever harm me or anyone else again. He removed a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. This contains additional information I've gathered on each of you. Information not included in the documents you received at the Rosewood. I thought you should know what else is in my possession. Boyd reached for the folder, but Monty stopped him. This is just for your viewing. Here, now. They flipped through the pages, their faces growing paler with each revelation. The folder contained bank statements showing Boyd's offshore accounts, documents proving Vivian had systematically alienated Natalie from Monty through years of manipulation, and evidence that Boyd and Preston had conspired on multiple financial schemes beyond just targeting Monty. This is invasion of privacy, Boyd sputtered. You can't. I already have. Monty cut him off. The question is not what I've done, but what I'll do next. What do you want from us? Vivian whispered, real fear in her eyes now. Complete severance, Monty replied. You will remove yourself from my life entirely. No contact with me, my associates, or my business interests. Boyd will close his Connecticut gallery and relocate his business. Vivian will retract any statement she's made to mutual friends about our marriage and divorce. You're asking us to uproot our lives, Boyd protested. I'm giving you a choice, Monty corrected. Comply, or I release everything I have to the appropriate authorities and individuals. And Natalie? Vivian asked, her voice breaking. She's still your daughter. For the first time, emotion flickered across Monty's face. A brief spasm of pain quickly controlled. Natalie made her choice. She chose deception and betrayal. She'll have to live with that decision. You cut off your own child? Vivian pressed. After everything you said about being there for her? I was there for her, Monty replied, his voice dangerously quiet. For 32 years. Through every milestone, every challenge. I supported her education, her career, her dreams. And in return, she conspired to use me and discard me. He stood, buttoning his jacket. You have 48 hours to provide me with a detailed plan for complying with my terms. After that, I proceed with full disclosure of everything in that folder and more. As he turned to leave, Boyd called after him. This isn't over, Montgomery. Monty paused at the door. Actually, Boyd, it's just beginning. Chapter 5, Hidden Depths. The following morning, Monty received an unexpected visitor at Sentinel Shield's offices. Diane Halverson, Preston's mother, waited in the reception area, looking both determined and uncomfortable. Mrs. Halverson, Monty greeted her, ushering her into his private office. This is unexpected. Diane Halverson was a dignified woman in her 60s, her silver hair styled conservatively, her clothing expensive but understated. Unlike her son, whose ambition had always outpaced his ethics, Diane had a reputation for integrity. I'll be direct, Montgomery, she began once seated. Whatever Preston has done, and I suspect it's serious given the canceled wedding and his evasiveness, I don't believe Natalie's relationship with you should be permanent collateral damage. Monty studied her carefully. With all due respect, Mrs. Halverson, you don't know the full situation. Then tell me, she challenged. Because the Preston I'm seeing now, panicked, aggressive, making frantic calls to financial advisors and attorneys, is not the son I thought I raised. And if he's involved in something that warranted your intervention, I want to understand it. There was something in her directness that Monty respected. He made a decision and pressed the intercom. Xavier, bring me the Redmond file. All of it. For the next hour, Monty systematically laid out the evidence, the conspiracy, the financial manipulation, the recorded conversations. Diane listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly troubled. I had suspicions, she finally said when he finished. Small inconsistencies in Preston's stories about his success. The sudden lifestyle upgrades without corresponding legitimate income. His father noticed too, but we didn't want to believe. Few parents do, Monty acknowledged. Diane straightened her shoulders. I'm not here to defend him. What he did, what they all did, was unconscionable. But I'm here to ask if there's any path to redemption for Natalie. Why would you advocate for her? Monty asked, genuinely curious. She was part of this scheme against me and was willing to bring your son into a marriage built on deception. Because I was young once too, Diane replied. And I made terrible mistakes that I later regretted deeply. The difference was, I had people who gave me a chance to atone. Not without consequences, but with an opportunity to prove I could be better. Monty's face remained impassive. I appreciate your perspective, Mrs. Halverson, but my decision is made. Diane nodded, accepting his position. As she stood to leave, she placed a business card on his desk. This is my private number. If you ever reconsider, I'd be willing to facilitate a conversation. Not reconciliation, but at least closure. After she left, Monty stared at the card, conflicting emotions warring within him. Finally, he placed it in his desk drawer rather than discarding it. A small, perhaps meaningless gesture that nonetheless felt significant. That evening, as Monty reviewed security protocols for an upcoming client project, Russell arrived with troubling news. Boyd's made some calls, he reported, to people we monitor because of their connections to less than legal problem solving. Monty's expression didn't change. Expected. Boyd's always thought money could fix anything, including making people disappear. Should we alert authorities? Not yet. Let's see how far he's willing to go. Monty pulled up a secure file on his computer. Implement Protocol Mamba. Full surveillance, countermeasures active, protective details in rotation. Protocol Mamba was a comprehensive security procedure developed for high-risk clients facing credible threats, now being deployed for Monty himself. It meant every electronic device Boyd used would be monitored, his movements tracked, his contacts scrutinized. What about Vivian? Russell asked. Is she part of this? Unknown, Monty replied. But we'll find out. 3 days later, Xavier burst into Monty's office without knocking, something he never did. Sir, we've intercepted something critical, he said urgently, placing a laptop before Monty. Boyd received this email an hour ago. The email was from an encrypted account, confirming receipt of a substantial Bitcoin transfer and outlining a plan to resolve the Pierce situation permanently within the week. Monty read it calmly. Send this to Theodore with instructions to prepare a sealed evidence package for the FBI. Then call this number. He wrote down a sequence of digits. Tell them Lighthouse Protocol activated and give them Boyd's home and business addresses. Xavier looked confused. Who am I calling? An old contact from my military days who now works in federal law enforcement. This just became a federal case, conspiracy to commit murder across state lines. Within hours, Boyd Kessler was in FBI custody, his home and gallery raided simultaneously. The news broke on local stations by evening, though the full details were withheld pending investigation. Monty watched the coverage from his home office, a glass of scotch in hand. His phone rang, Vivian's number. Did you do this? She demanded when he answered, her voice shaking with rage and fear. Boyd did this to himself, Monty replied evenly. He chose to escalate from fraud to attempted murder. Murder? That's absurd. Boyd would never. The FBI has the evidence, Vivian, including cryptocurrency transfers to known contract killers. You might want to lawyer up yourself, depending on your level of involvement. A long silence followed. I had nothing to do with this, she finally said, her voice smaller now. I swear, Montgomery, whatever else I've done, I would never. For your sake, I hope that's true, he replied. Because if the investigation reveals otherwise, there's nothing I can do to help you. After hanging up, Monty poured another scotch and walked to the wall of windows overlooking the lake. The water reflected the moonlight, peaceful and undisturbed, contrasting sharply with the storm he had unleashed. His phone rang again, Natalie this time. He let go to voicemail. Minutes later, a text. Dad, please. I need to talk to you. I had nothing to do with what Boyd was planning. I'm scared. Monty stared at the message, feeling the familiar pull of paternal concern warring with his resolution to cut all ties. After long consideration, he typed a reply, "Contact Diane Halverson. She'll help you get proper legal representation. Do not attempt to contact me again." He then blocked her number, finishing his drink in silence as the ripples on the lake gradually stilled to glass-like perfection. Chapter 6. Shifting Alliances. 1 week after Boyd's arrest, Monty received a visit from Special Agent Amelia Donaldson of the FBI. They met in a conference room at Sentinel Shield rather than at his home, maintaining the professional boundary he preferred. Agent Donaldson was sharp-featured and direct, with the focused intensity Monty recognized from his own military days. "Mr. Pierce, thank you for your cooperation so far. We have some additional questions about your history with Mr. Kessler." "Of course," Monty replied, "though I've already provided a comprehensive statement." "You have," she acknowledged. "But we're now investigating a broader pattern of illegal activity tied to Mr. Kessler's art dealership. Your name appears in several documents we've seized, not as a participant, but as a potential target." This caught Monty's attention. "Target in what sense?" "Financial," she clarified. "It appears your daughter's wedding was part of a larger scheme. Mr. Kessler and Mr. Redmond had plans to approach you for investment in what they called the Connecticut Collection, supposedly rare artworks being assembled for a major exhibition, but actually a sophisticated Ponzi scheme." Monty absorbed this information. "Have you spoken with Preston Redmond?" "We have. He's cooperating now, claiming he was manipulated by Kessler." She gave him a knowing look. "Though our assessment suggests he was a willing participant until things went south." "And my daughter?" "Natalie Pierce." Agent Donaldson consulted her notes. "Ms. Pierce maintains she was unaware of the full scope of their plans, particularly the financial scheme involving the art collection. However, she has admitted to knowing about and participating in the plan to extract the wedding funds from you under false pretenses." Monty nodded, his expression unchanged despite the confirmation of Natalie's betrayal. "What happens now?" "Mr. Kessler will face multiple serious charges, including conspiracy to commit murder for hire. Mr. Redmond is negotiating a plea deal in exchange for testimony. Your ex-wife, Vivian Harlow, is currently classified as a person of interest, not a suspect." She paused. "And your daughter is cooperating as a witness, though she may face lesser charges related to the financial fraud." After Agent Donaldson left, Russell found Monty in his office, staring at an old family photograph he normally kept locked away. "You okay?" Russell asked. "I've been better," Monty admitted, a rare glimpse of vulnerability. "Learning your own daughter saw you as nothing more than a resource to be exploited isn't easy, even when you suspected it." Russell nodded, understanding without need for elaboration. "The Kessler situation is contained. The threat against you has been neutralized. Maybe time to step back, take some time away from all this." "No," Monty replied, replacing the photograph in his desk drawer. "There's still the matter of Vivian. Her part in this wasn't just the wedding scheme. It was 15 years of poisoning my relationship with my daughter, of creating the environment where Natalie could be turned against me." "The authorities are handling Kessler and Redmond," Russell pointed out. "Maybe let them handle Vivian too. The law can address the criminal aspects," Monty agreed. "But some betrayals require a more personal accounting." 2 days later, Monty attended a charity gala at the Riverside Museum of Art, an event he knew Vivian would attend, as she sat on the museum's fundraising committee. He arrived alone, immaculately dressed, and made a substantial donation at the entrance, ensuring his presence would be noted. The whispers started the moment he entered the grand hall. His appearance at a social event so soon after the scandal of his daughter's canceled wedding and Boyd's arrest was unexpected. More shocking still was his apparent composure, his ease as he mingled with the city's elite. He spotted Vivian across the room, surrounded by a protective circle of friends. The news of Boyd's arrest had clearly affected her. Her normally perfect appearance showed signs of strain, her smile forced when required for social niceties. Monty approached her group during dinner, timing his arrival for maximum impact. "Vivian," he greeted her with polite neutrality. "You look well. considering the circumstances. Her friends exchanged uncomfortable glances before discreetly creating distance, leaving them in a bubble of artificial privacy amid the crowded room. "What are you doing here, Montgomery?" Vivian hissed, maintaining her social smile despite her anger. "Haven't you done enough damage?" "I've done nothing but respond to the damage others attempted to inflict on me," he corrected her calmly. "Boyd made his choices. So did Preston. So did you. I had nothing to do with Boyd's plan to—" She stopped herself, aware of potential eavesdroppers. "To have me killed?" Monty finished for her, his voice low but clear. "I believe you. That was Boyd crossing a line even you wouldn't cross. But don't pretend innocence in everything else." Vivian's facade cracked slightly, real emotion breaking through. "What do you want from me? My reputation is in tatters, my relationship destroyed, my relationship with Natalie strained. Isn't that enough for you?" "Almost," Monty replied. "There's one more thing." He produced an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. "This contains instructions for returning every item of my mother's jewelry you took in the divorce. The pieces you claimed had sentimental value to you, despite never wearing them while we were married." Vivian paled. "Those were part of the settlement. They were family heirlooms meant for Natalie," Monty interrupted. "Since she's chosen to sever her connection to me and my family, this should be returned to the Pierce family line. My sister's daughters will appreciate them." Vivian stared at him, recognizing the underlying message. He was systematically erasing every connection, reclaiming every piece of himself she and Natalie had thought was theirs to keep or discard. "You become cruel, Montgomery," she whispered. "No," he contradicted her. "I become clear-sighted. There's a difference." He stepped back, preparing to return to his table. "The instructions include a deadline. I suggest you meet it." As he walked away, he felt a strange lightness, not satisfaction or pleasure or discomfort, but the unburdening that comes with closing a chapter completely. Boyd would face justice through the legal system. Preston's career and reputation were destroyed. Natalie would live with the consequences of her choices. And now, Vivian would return the last physical ties binding them together. Later that evening, as Monty prepared to leave the gala, he was approached by Helen Westbrook, an old family friend who had known his parents well. "Montgomery," she said, taking his arm. "Walk me to my car, would you? These heels are killing me." Outside in the cool night air, Helen spoke her mind with the directness of her 80 years. "I won't pretend to understand everything that's happened, but I know enough." Vivian always had a talent for rewriting history, and that Boyd character never struck me as trustworthy. Monty remained silent, allowing her to continue. "But Natalie was a good child once," Helen went on, "before Vivian got her hooks in deep. The girl I remember bringing to your mother's garden parties wouldn't have turned on you without years of poisoning." "People make their own choices, Helen," Monty replied, "regardless of influence." "True enough," the elderly woman conceded. "But not everyone has the strength to resist a persistent poison. Some of us are more susceptible than others." They reached her car, where her driver waited. Before getting in, Helen patted Monty's cheek affectionately. "Your father was a hard man, too, you know, principled to a fault. But he learned, eventually, that justice without mercy becomes its own kind of poison." She entered her car, leaving Monty standing alone in the parking lot, her words echoing in his mind. For a brief moment, he considered reaching out to Natalie, not to forgive, but perhaps to understand. Then he remembered the rehearsal dinner, her voice clear through the recording. "Boyd's been more of a father to me anyway." No, some betrayals cut too deep for understanding or mercy. Justice would have to be enough. Chapter 7. Unexpected Revelations. 3 months after Boyd Kessler's arrest, the media frenzy had finally begun to subside. Boyd remained in federal custody, denied bail due to the severity of the charges and his substantial overseas assets, making him a flight risk. Preston Redmond had secured a plea deal in exchange for his testimony, though he still faced significant prison time for his role in multiple financial crimes. Vivian had retreated from public life, selling her Connecticut house and reportedly relocating to Arizona to be near her sister. The jewelry had been returned as instructed, delivered by courier rather than in person, each piece accounted for and authenticated. Monty had immersed himself in work, expanding Sentinel Shield to include a new division specializing in fraud prevention for high-net-worth individuals. The irony wasn't lost on him, transforming his personal nightmare into a business opportunity. But the demand was undeniable, and he had unique insight into how the wealthy could be targeted by those they trusted most. On a crisp autumn morning, as Monty reviewed security protocols for a new client, Russell interrupted with unusual urgency. "You need to see this," he said, placing a file on Monty's desk. Xavier found it during a deep background search on Boyd Kessler. It wasn't in any of the FBI materials. Monty opened the file and froze. Inside was documentation of a private detective Boyd had hired 15 years ago, not to investigate Monty, as might be expected, but to investigate Vivian. Why would Boyd investigate Vivian back then? Monty asked, scanning the reports. They were already involved. "Keep reading," Russell urged. The detective's reports revealed a pattern that stunned even Monty, with all his suspicions and insights into his ex-wife's character. Apparently, Boyd hadn't been Vivian's first affair. He had been her fourth. More shocking still was the detective's conclusion that Vivian had been systematically targeting wealthy men, using each relationship to climb socially and financially before moving to the next opportunity. Boyd was investigating whether he was being played, Russell explained, whether he was just another stepping stone. Monty continued reading, his expression darkening as he reached the final pages. These contained DNA test results, comparing Boyd's DNA with samples from Natalie. "No," Monty whispered, the implications hitting him with the force of a physical blow. The results were conclusive. Boyd Kessler was Natalie's biological father. "The timeline checks out," Russell said quietly. Vivian's first documented meeting with Boyd was at that gallery opening in Boston, about a year before Natalie was born. Monty sat back in his chair, the revelation reshaping his entire understanding of the past 32 years. "She knew," he said finally. "Vivian always knew Natalie wasn't mine." "It appears so," Russell agreed. "And based on these notes, Boyd discovered it about 10 years ago, but kept it from both you and Natalie." "Why?" Monty asked, though the answer was forming in his mind even as he spoke. "Control," Russell suggested. "Leverage over Vivian. And perhaps protection of his relationship with Natalie. If she knew he concealed this for years while watching you raise her." Monty stood abruptly, needing movement to process the shock. All these years, the ballet recitals, the college tuition, the nightmares and fevers and heartbreaks. I was raising another man's child. A child conceived in betrayal before I even knew betrayal existed in my marriage. "What will you do with this information?" Russell asked. Monty stared out the window, watching autumn leaves swirl across the parking lot. "Nothing. For now." That evening, alone in his home, Monty poured a scotch and allowed himself to fully process the revelation. The anger came first, white-hot and consuming. Not just at Vivian and Boyd, but at the cosmic unfairness of it all. Then, gradually, something deeper and more painful. The realization that his most fundamental relationship, the one he had thought unbreakable despite everything, had been built on a lie from the very beginning. Yet alongside this pain came an unexpected clarity. Natalie's gradual estrangement over the years, her susceptibility to Vivian's manipulation, her ultimate betrayal, all took on a different dimension in light of biological reality. It didn't excuse her actions, but it provided a context he hadn't previously considered. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The screen displayed a number he didn't recognize. "Montgomery Pierce." He answered, his voice controlled despite his emotional turmoil. "Mr. Pierce, this is Dr. Eleanor Winters from Hartford Memorial Hospital." A professional female voice responded. "I'm calling regarding Natalie Pierce. You're listed as her emergency contact." Monty's grip tightened on the phone. "What happened?" "Ms. Pierce was brought in following a single-vehicle accident on Route 9. She's stable, but has sustained serious injuries requiring surgery. She's been asking for you." Monty closed his eyes, conflicting emotions warring within him. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. The hospital corridors were harshly lit, the antiseptic smell bringing back unwelcome memories of his own military injuries. Dr. Winters met him outside the surgical ward, a competent-looking woman in her 50s with tired eyes and precise movements. "Mr. Pierce, thank you for coming. Natalie's in surgery now for a compound fracture of the femur and internal bleeding. The prognosis is good, but recovery will be lengthy." "Was she alone in the car?" Monty asked. "Yes. Preliminary police report suggests she swerved to avoid an animal on the road and hit a guardrail. No alcohol or substances involved." The doctor hesitated. "Before we took her to surgery, she was quite distressed, not just from pain. She kept saying she needed to tell you something important." Monty nodded, absorbing this information. "When can I see her?" "Surgery should conclude within the hour. She'll be in recovery for another hour after that. I can have someone notify you when she's stabilized and conscious." Monty settled into the waiting room, declining coffee from a volunteer. As he sat, he noticed a familiar figure across the room. Diane Halverson, Preston's mother, reading a magazine with the concentrated focus of someone trying to distract themselves. She looked up, sensing his gaze, and, after a moment of surprise, approached him. "Montgomery, I didn't expect to see you here." "I could say the same," he replied, gesturing for her to sit. "I've been helping Natalie since everything fell apart," Diane explained. "Not financially. She's been handling that on her own since losing her trust fund, but as a support person, someone to talk to who understands the situation." "That's unexpected," Monty admitted. Diane shrugged. "I failed with Preston. I saw the warning signs for years and chose to ignore them, telling myself he'd grow out of his entitled behavior. Maybe helping Natalie is my way of atoning for that failure." They sat in surprisingly comfortable silence until Diane spoke again. "She's been trying to rebuild her life. New job at a small local company, therapy twice a week, volunteer work with at-risk teens. No contact with Vivian or Boyd." "Why are you telling me this?" Monty asked. "Because despite everything, I think you still care what happens to her," Diane replied simply. "And because she cares what you think, even now." Before Monty could respond, a nurse approached. "Mr. Pierce, Natalie is out of surgery and asking for you." Diane touched his arm lightly as he stood. "Just listen. That's all I ask." Natalie looked small in the hospital bed, her face pale against the white sheets, and four in her arm and her leg elevated in a complex brace. When she saw Monty, her eyes filled with tears. "Dad," she whispered, her voice rough from the intubation tube, recently removed. "You came. The hospital called," he replied, keeping his distance. "They said you needed to tell me something." Natalie nodded weakly. "I found out about Boyd, that he's my biological father." Monty stiffened, surprised. "Ow, FBI investigation," she explained, each word clearly costing her effort. "They found the DNA test in Boyd's records. Agent Donaldson told me last week." Monty moved closer despite himself. "I just found out today. Different source." "Doesn't matter," Natalie continued. "Needed you to know. I didn't know. All these years, I didn't know." "Would it have changed anything if you had?" Monty asked, the question that had been haunting him. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Everything. It would have changed everything." She reached out a hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Monty took it. Her fingers were cold, reminding him painfully of holding her hand at ice skating lessons when she was 7. "Not asking for forgiveness," she whispered. "Just need you to know, you're my real father. Always. The only one who mattered." The monitor tracking her vital signs beeped insistently as her pulse elevated. A nurse entered, checking the readings with concern. "She needs to rest," the nurse advised Monty. "You can come back tomorrow." As he turned to leave, Natalie gripped his hand with surprising strength. "One more thing," she said urgently. "Mom's gone to Arizona, but not to her sister. She's meeting someone, a new target, a widower with a tech fortune." Monty frowned. "How do you know this?" "She called me before I stopped all contact, bragging about her new start. Said she'd finally found someone worthy after wasting years with Boyd." The nurse intervened more firmly. "Sir, please. She really needs to rest now." Monty gently disentangled his hand from Natalie's. I'll be back tomorrow, he said, surprised to realize he meant it. Outside the hospital room, he found Diane waiting. How is she? She asked. Recovering, Monty replied, his mind already processing Natalie's revelation about Vivian. Thank you for looking out for her when I didn't. Diane studied his face. What will you do now? Finish what I started, Monty answered, but perhaps with new information that changes the equation. Chapter 8. The Final Pieces. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Monty drove his rental car through the exclusive Paradise Valley neighborhood. His research had identified Vivian's widower with a tech fortune as Leonard Garrison, founder of a successful cybersecurity firm that had recently been acquired by a major tech conglomerate for billions. Garrison's Spanish-style mansion sat on 5 acres of manicured desert landscape, a monument to wealth that would certainly appeal to Vivian's sensibilities. Monty parked outside the gates, observing the property through specialized binoculars. Security was visible but not excessive, typical for wealthy individuals who hadn't yet experienced any threats to their safety. His phone rang, Russell checking in from Connecticut. You sure about this approach? Russell asked when Monty answered. We could handle Vivian more discreetly. This isn't just about Vivian anymore, Monty replied, watching a catering van pass through the security gate. It's about breaking a pattern that will otherwise continue indefinitely. And Natalie? How does she fit into this new plan? Monty lowered the binoculars, considering the question. He had visited her in the hospital every day for a week before returning to Connecticut to make arrangements. Their conversations had been cautious, layered with unspoken emotions and unresolved betrayals, but they had talked more honestly than they had in years. That remains to be seen, he finally answered. For now, let's focus on the task at hand. Is everything prepared on your end? All set, Russell confirmed. Theodore has the documents ready. Xavier has the technical aspects covered. We're just waiting for your signal. Good. I'll make contact tomorrow. The following morning, Monty dressed carefully in a bespoke suit that projected both wealth and authority. He had arranged a meeting with Leonard Garrison under the pretext of discussing potential security upgrades for his estate, a service Sentinel Shield legitimately provided to exclusive clients. As his car approached the mansion's gate, he noted Vivian's silver Mercedes in the circular driveway. Perfect timing. Leonard Garrison greeted him in a sunlit office overlooking the pool area. He was in his mid-60s, fit for his age, with intelligent eyes and the relaxed confidence of someone accustomed to success. Mr. Pierce, a pleasure to meet you, Garrison said, shaking Monty's hand firmly. Your company's reputation is impressive. I've been meaning to upgrade my security systems since the acquisition made headlines. Increased public profile often necessitates enhanced precautions. Monty agreed smoothly. Shall we discuss your current setup and concerns? They were deep in conversation about surveillance systems when the office door opened and Vivian entered, carrying a tray with iced tea. She froze when she saw Monty, the tray wobbling dangerously in her hands. Montgomery, she gasped, her composed facade cracking. What are you doing here? Garrison looked between them, confusion evident. You two know each other? Intimately, Monty replied, his voice calm. Vivian is my ex-wife. Ex-wife, Garrison repeated, his posture shifting subtly. Vivian, you told me you were widowed. The tray finally slipped from Vivian's hands, shattering on the tile floor, iced tea spreading like a flood around designer shoes that Monty recognized as a recent purchase, likely funded by Garrison's generosity. Leonard, I can explain, Vivian began, her voice taking on the familiar, pleading tone Monty knew so well. Montgomery and I have been separated for years. It's complicated. It's actually quite simple, Monty interrupted, removing a folder from his briefcase. Mr. Garrison, I apologize for the deception regarding the purpose of my visit. I'm not here to discuss your security systems. The Sentinel Shield would be happy to provide those services at a later date. Then why are you here? Garrison demanded, his initial confusion hardening into wariness. To provide you with information that may protect you from a particular type of security threat. Monty opened the folder and removed several documents. Information about Vivian Harlow's pattern of targeting wealthy men, her involvement in financial fraud schemes, and her connections to Boyd Kessler, who is currently awaiting trial for multiple felonies, including conspiracy to commit murder for hire. This is slander, Vivian cried, her face flushed with anger and fear. Leonard, he's just a bitter ex-husband trying to ruin my chance at happiness. Garrison, however, was already reviewing the documents with the focused attention of a successful businessman. These bank transfers, these timeline correlations. He looked up at Vivian. You told me you inherited your Connecticut house from your parents. I can explain everything, Vivian insisted, moving toward him, but Garrison raised a hand to stop her. Mr. Pierce, what is your objective here? He asked, his voice now coolly professional. Intervention, Monty replied simply. Not revenge, as Vivian suggests, but prevention. You're the latest in a pattern that stretches back decades. I'm merely providing you with facts that allow you to make an informed decision. Garrison nodded, then turned to Vivian. I think you should pack your things and leave today. My security team will assist and ensure you take only what legitimately belongs to you. Leonard, please, Vivian begged, tears now streaming down her perfectly made-up face. This is all a misunderstanding. The DNA test results showing Boyd Kessler is Natalie's biological father. Is that a misunderstanding too? Monty asked quietly. Vivian went utterly still, the color draining from her face. How did you? It doesn't matter how I know. Monty cut her off. What matters is that you lied to me for 32 years about the most fundamental relationship in my life. You lied to Natalie her entire life. And now you're lying to Mr. Garrison about your very identity. Garrison pressed a button on his desk. Security will escort you to collect your belongings, Vivian. Whatever our relationship was, it's over now. 2 security guards appeared promptly. Vivian glanced between them, Garrison and Monty, apparently calculating her options before her shoulders slumped in defeat. This isn't over, Montgomery, she hissed as she passed him on her way out. You've taken everything from me. No, Vivian, he replied calmly. I've simply stopped you from taking anything more from others. After she left, Garrison poured 2 glasses of scotch from a crystal decanter, handing one to Monty. I should thank you, I suppose, though this is a hell of a way to discover I've been deceived. Better now than after marriage or commingled assets, Monty observed, accepting the drink. She would have eventually moved on to the next opportunity, leaving maximum damage in her wake. Garrison studied him over the rim of his glass. You didn't do this out of the goodness of your heart. What's your real motivation? Closure, Monty admitted, and ensuring that Vivian's pattern of destruction ends permanently. What happens to her now? That depends on her. The evidence I've provided you is also being sent to the FBI as a supplement to their ongoing investigation into Boyd Kessler's activities. Whether charges result from that will be up to the prosecutors. Garrison nodded, understanding the implications. And you? What happens to you now? Monty considered the question, thinking of Natalie in her hospital bed, of the decades of deception, of the shattered family that had never been what he thought it was. I rebuild, he said finally, on foundations of truth this time, however painful that truth might be. Later that evening, as Monty's plane departed Phoenix, he received a text from an unknown number. She left with 2 suitcases and a painting she claimed was hers. Security verified ownership. No incidents. Thank you for the warning. LG. Following this was another message, this one from Diane Halverson. Natalie's being discharged tomorrow. She's asked if you'll be back in time. Monty stared at the messages, feeling a strange lightness despite the turbulence the plane was experiencing. For the first time in months, perhaps years, he was moving forward rather than simply reacting to betrayal. Whether that forward motion included Natalie remained to be seen, but at least the decision would be based on truth rather than illusion. He typed a reply to Diane, I'll be there. Flight lands at 8 a.m. Chapter 9, Justice Served. 2 years after the wedding that never happened, Monty stood at the window of his office at Sentinel Shield, watching autumn leaves swirl across the parking lot. The company had expanded significantly, now occupying 3 floors of the building and specializing in personal security for high-net-worth individuals, with a particular focus on protection from fraud and exploitation. The legal consequences for those who had conspired against him had finally played out to their conclusions. Boyd Kessler had been sentenced to 20 years for multiple charges, including conspiracy to commit murder for hire, art fraud, and tax evasion. Preston Redmond, after his plea deal, received 8 years for wire fraud and conspiracy. Both men's professional lives were destroyed beyond recovery. Vivian had avoided prison, but not consequences. The FBI investigation had uncovered enough evidence of her knowledge of Boyd's fraudulent art dealings to force a plea agreement. She received 5 years of probation, substantial fines, and was required to make restitution to several victims. More devastating to her personally was the complete social ostracism that followed. The society circle she had worked so hard to climb rejected her entirely. Last Monty had heard, she was living modestly in Nevada, working as an administrative assistant at a community college, a far cry from the luxury she had schemed so ruthlessly to attain. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Russell entered, carrying a newspaper. "Thought you might want to see this," he said, placing it on Monty's desk. The business section featured an article about Sentinel Shield's new initiative, a foundation providing resources and support to victims of complex financial fraud, particularly those victimized by people they trusted. "Good press," Russell observed. "The Montgomery Pierce Foundation for Victim Recovery making quite an impact." Monty nodded, scanning the article. "The irony isn't lost on me. Building something positive from my own experience as a victim." Speaking of building something positive, Russell began, hesitating uncharacteristically. "Have you given any more thought to Natalie's proposal?" The question hung in the air. Natalie's relationship with Monty had undergone a complex evolution since her accident and the revelations that followed. After months of careful, tentative communication, she had asked if she could join the foundation's work, using her experience on both sides of fraud to help others recognize warning signs and recover from betrayal. "I have," Monty replied finally, "and I've made my decision." Later that afternoon, Monty met Natalie at a small cafe equidistant between his office and the physical therapy center where she now worked helping accident survivors regain mobility. Her recovery had been long and painful, leaving her with a slight limp, but also with the resilience she had lacked before. "You look well," he observed as she joined him, noting the healthy color in her cheeks and the clear confidence in her eyes that had replaced the manipulative charm she had inherited from Vivian. "Better every day," she agreed, both physically and otherwise. After ordering coffee, she looked at him directly. "Have you decided about my proposal to work with the foundation?" Monty studied her face, the face he had believed for 32 years belonged to his biological daughter. The DNA revelation had shaken him to his core, forcing him to reevaluate every assumption about his life and family. Yet in the midst of that painful reckoning had come an unexpected truth. Biology wasn't the only definition of fatherhood. "I've decided to accept your proposal," he said, "but with conditions." Relief washed over her face. "Anything. You'll start as a consultant, not a full employee. You'll work with the educational outreach program, sharing your perspective with others who have been manipulated into participating in fraud. After 6 months, we'll reevaluate." Natalie nodded, accepting the terms without protest. "Thank you for the opportunity. I know I haven't earned your trust back yet, but I will." "Trust is earned through consistent actions over time," Monty agreed. "This is a beginning, not a resolution." They sipped their coffee in surprisingly comfortable silence before Natalie spoke again. "Have you heard the latest about Boyd?" "No," Monty replied. "I don't follow his situation closely. He's trying to get his sentence reduced by providing information about other art dealers involved in fraud. The FBI doesn't seem interested." She hesitated. "He also tried to contact me again. Sent a letter claiming he always wanted to acknowledge me as his daughter, but Vivian wouldn't allow it." "And what did you do with the letter?" Monty asked, curious about her response rather than the content of Boyd's manipulations. "Sent it to the FBI for their file and blocked all further communications from him," she answered simply. "He's not my father. Biology doesn't make a parent. Monty nodded, acknowledging the weight of her words. No, it doesn't. After finishing their coffee, they walked to the parking lot together. Before getting into her car, Natalie turned to him. There's something else I've been wanting to ask you. Go ahead. Diane Halverson has been a real support to me through everything. She's hosting a Thanksgiving dinner and asked if I would invite you. She rushed on before he could respond. It would just be a small gathering. Diane, her daughter from Seattle, me, and you if you're willing. No pressure, just an opportunity. Monty considered the invitation. 2 years ago, he would have rejected it outright, viewing any family gathering as a potential trap. But the man he was now, shaped by betrayal but not defined by it, saw things differently. Tell Diane I accept, he said finally. I'll bring the wine. Natalie's smile was genuine, without the calculated charm that had once reminded him so painfully of Vivian. I'll let her know. As she drove away, Monty remained in the parking lot, contemplating the journey from the empty wedding venue to this moment. The betrayals had been real and devastating. The consequences he had engineered for those who had wronged him had been severe and uncompromising. He had not forgiven, would never forgive, the calculated deception that had nearly destroyed him. Yet somehow, in the process of delivering justice, he had also found a path forward. Not back to what was lost, but towards something new. Something built on clearer vision and harder truths. His phone buzzed with a text from Russell. Security details for the Reynolds contract look good. Moving forward? Monty typed his response, yes. Proceed. He pocketed his phone and walked to his car, steps sure and purpose clear. The past had